Welcome to another episode of Science in Life. I'm Dr. Sumedha Jayasena. It has been 17 months since the diagnosis of the first case of SARS-CoV-2 viral infection in humans that caused the COVID-19 pandemic. As of May 2021, there are over 140 million SARS-CoV-2 viral infections and over 3 million worldwide deaths due to the COVID-19 disease. At the moment, in India alone, more than 400,000 infections per day are being reported. Currently, there is a new scare based on the emerging variants of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Should we be worried about these variants? This presentation sheds some light on the emerging viral variants, so you are aware of them. It is possible that the longer we keep the SARS-CoV-2 virus in human circulation, the more we must worry about the evolution of this virus into variants and perhaps into new strains with stable biological characteristics that would be undesirable to the human host. We are witnessing a natural evolution of the virus within the human population that causes severe human disease. Such an evolution could lead to viral strains that could be potentially more infectious, more pathogenic, and more deadly. If that happens, we may need new vaccines and new drugs to combat the disease caused by the evolved viral variants or even new strains. While these are all possibilities, the chances for them to be realized would be slim. But we must stay vigilant. We live in an information-rich, technologically advanced world, which is good in certain ways and ring alarm bells in some other ways. Using advanced technologies, we were able to sequence the virus to unveil the viral RNA sequence quickly. Based on that information, we rapidly devised tests to diagnose the virus and develop vaccines and other therapies to control the infection and the disease. We can sequence several thousands of viral specimens across the globe within days and rapidly analyze them to understand how the genetic sequence of the virus is changing with time and where each variant is spreading around the globe. At the moment, we are wrestling with the information that is accumulating on viral variants to understand them better. In this process, the question is, are we really panicking and putting ourselves ahead of the biology of this virus and sounding alarm bells? What is a variant of a virus? A variant is a virus whose genome sequence differs from that of a reference or the ancestral virus. In the case of SARS-CoV-2, the reference sequence is the original virus isolated and sequenced in Wuhan, China. By now, we can't find the original viral genome in any of the ongoing infections anywhere in the world, as the virus has already accumulated mutations as a result of its replication over more than a year in human circulation. What we have now are all variants, though we get to hear about only a few of them in the media. What is a strain of a virus? Strain is a variant with unique and stable biological characteristics or a stable phenotype. Strains have biological characteristics that are different from the ancestral virus. So far, it is still very early to call any of these SARS-CoV-2 variant strains. Viruses infect and replicate inside their host to produce and release as many daughter viruses as they could. The resulting new viruses find uninfected hosts and repeat this cycle of replication and infection. They keep doing this until they run out of the number of hosts that allow them to replicate. In this repetitive cycle, the viruses evolve to make them more adaptable and fitting to survive in their current host or jump into a new host species. For an example, a virus could jump from the monkey to the human. Biological or natural evolution is supported by the accumulation of errors or mutations in the viral genome. If we take the SARS-CoV-2 virus, its RNA genome accumulates errors in each replication cycle. It is estimated that on average, this virus produces 50 million daughter viruses within an infected individual. With over 140 million infections reported, the original SARS-CoV-2 virus has undergone more than 1 trillion replication cycles. So, we could imagine the theoretical mutation load or the number of errors that these variants must have accumulated. But for several reasons, the mutation load we see in the SARS-CoV-2 virus is not all that high. Why do viruses accumulate errors in their genome when they replicate? This is because the enzymes that help copy the RNA genome are not flawless. They make mistakes. To correct these mistakes, there are proofreading or editing enzymes. In general, RNA viruses are notorious for mutating their genomes, as most do not have proofreading or error correcting mechanisms. Those RNA viruses without proofreading mechanisms, for example, the influenza virus, can have one mistake or mutation in every 1,000 bases during replication. However, the SARS-CoV-2 virus has proofreading capacity, which is a good thing. As a result, it accumulates errors once in every 10,000 bases. The RNA genome of the SARS-CoV-2 virus has 30,000 bases. To be precise, it has 29,903. So every time it replicates, it has a chance of making 3 mutations or errors. These errors that accumulate in the viral genome over time are the basis of the emergence of viral variants that we are witnessing. We can't capture most of these mutations as they are disastrous to the virus. Variants that carry these mutations do not survive. On average, it has been observed that the SARS-CoV-2 virus accumulates only 2 surviving errors per month in human circulation. In a database of 90,000 viral sequences, any 2 viral sequences differ only by 10 errors or 10 nucleotides. These surviving mutations in the viral genome could affect the virus as well as the human host. Mutations can manifest in several ways. Mutations in the variants of the SARS-CoV-2 virus could result in changes in proteins that the variant viruses produce. How does this happen? An RNA sequence dictates the protein sequence it will make. The information encoded in RNA is read in 3 bases at a time or in triplets to make a protein. Each triplet in an RNA sequence codes for an amino acid, the basic building block of proteins. The 3 base combinations in each triplet dictates which amino acid it brings to incorporate into the growing chain of amino acids. Some errors in an RNA do not change the amino acid in the protein. This is because multiple RNA triplets can code for the same amino acid. For example, these 4 combinations of triplets code for the same amino acid, in this case alanine. Mutations of this nature that do not affect the sequence of the amino acids in a protein are called synonymous mutations. However, on the other hand, certain mutations in RNA triplet codes change the amino acid within a protein, resulting in a possible change in the overall structure of a viral protein, which could also change the function of that protein. Mutations that cause changes in amino acids in proteins are called non-synonymous mutations. These non-synonymous mutations are the worrisome mutations. Certain mutations could bring disastrous outcomes to the virus. For example, specific mutations in a particular region of the viral RNA that codes for the spike protein could change the spike protein structure by folding it differently so that it could not bind the ACE2 receptor on human cells. The variants carrying such mutations fail to infect new hosts, and as a result, they fail to survive. Those variants are beneficial to the human host but not to the virus. On the other hand, specific mutations in the viral RNA could change the spike protein to fold it in a slightly different way to bind the ACE2 receptor more tightly, giving the virus an advantage to efficiently infect the host. Such a variant is likely to survive and rapidly spread within the human population. These naturally occurring mutations in the viral genome provide the viral variant a survival advantage within the host. As a result, such variants are naturally selected over time. This is the natural selection of the survival of the fittest, explained in the Darwinian theory of evolution. The emergence of such variants, beneficial to the virus but harmful to the human host, becomes more favorable and occurs rapidly under certain conditions. For example, when we let the SARS-CoV-2 virus circulate within us for a long time. When the SARS-CoV-2 virus spreads quickly within a large population in a short period, as we currently observe in India. When the virus infects immunocompromised individuals. These are certain conditions that put pressure on the virus for its survival in the host. So it is up to us to minimize the fertile opportunities for the emergence of harmful viral variants. For example, by wearing masks, frequent hand washing, social distancing, and finally getting vaccinated will help control the emergence of harmful variants. As mentioned earlier, the current forms of the SARS-CoV-2 virus in circulation are all variants of the original or the ancestral virus isolated in December 2019. Although they all have mutations, only a handful of variants with specific mutations have received attention. The World Health Organization considered these variants as variants of concern, or VOC, because of their potential risk to the human host. These risks have not been fully understood yet. Out of many variants, why certain variants became VOC? When the virus spread within certain human populations, the resulting variants retained specific mutations over time. Since these mutations or errors occur randomly or by chance, it is also possible to mutate out or correct these particular mutations in a lineage as the virus spread. But it hasn't happened in these variants of concern. This is because of the selective advantages that these specific mutations provide the variants to survive better in the host. As the host, we also contribute to the rapid evolution of particular variants. 80% of the viral transmission is caused by 10% of infected individuals called super spreaders. There are certain characteristics that make an individual a super spreader. Some people exhale a large number of droplet particles in their breath. Individuals who expel more than 150 particles per liter of exhale volume constitute super spreaders. These individuals usually are obese. In most cases, they are also older adults. Super spreaders have thinner saliva. People without teeth don't make good super spreaders. The time of viral infection also matters. After the onset of symptoms, the rate of transmission rapidly increases from day 3 to day 7. The highest transmission rate and an extraordinary number of viral particles are seen on days 8 and 9 during SARS-CoV-2 infection. Further, with the progression of infection, the size of viral particles produced within an individual becomes smaller. As a result, a large number of small viral particles are packed into droplets in an exhale, making effective transmission vehicles for the virus. Super spreaders contribute to the founder effect. This is when a super spreader rapidly transmits a variant that he or she carries into an uninfected population. A relatively small number of super spreaders can carry a variant from one location to another and quickly spread it in the new location. For example, tourists from one country with an infected variant can introduce it to several other countries. Or a super spreader can go into populated places like political rallies, religious gatherings, weddings, birthday parties, bars, and many other places. Under such scenarios, a variant carried by the super spreader will spread in new populations, even if the variant does not have a benefit from its genetic mutations. This is called the founder effect. Mutation profiles of variants are helpful for contact tracing. They act like viral fingerprints to trace close contacts in infection clusters. Mutation profiles also help to trace the origin of the variants. For example, whether it was introduced from a different country or whether the variant was evolved locally. Variants of concern are the variants that take over other lineages in populations. Several such SARS-CoV-2 variants already emerged from different geographical locations in the world. The following are the prominent ones. B.1.1.7, the UK variant. This was discovered on December 14th of 2020 in the United Kingdom. Compared to the ancestral Wuhan reference viral sequence, B.1.1.7 variant has accumulated 23 non-synonymous mutations. 49% of these mutations are located in the gene encoding for the spike protein that contains the receptor binding domain, or RBD. All of these mutations in the RNA resulted in substitutions of amino acids in the spike protein of B.1.1.7 variant, which is different from the original virus. For example, in N501Y mutation, amino acid asparagine residue located at the 501 position in the spike protein of the original virus is substituted by the amino acid tyrosine in the B.1.1.7 variant. In this case, the neutral amino acid asparagine is replaced by a hydrophobic amino acid tyrosine. The cluster of such amino acid changes in the spike protein could result in its function. Overall, the emerging evidence from limited studies suggests that B.1.1.7 variant has 10 times higher infectivity and 3-fold higher viral load, 56% faster spread than other variants, and 35% increased risk of death. Currently, B.1.1.7 variant is reported in over 110 countries. Next, the B.1.351, the South African variant. This was identified on December 18th of 2020 in South Africa. Compared to the ancestral Wuhan reference sequence, 13 non-synonymous mutations are present in B.1.351. 10 of them, that is 77%, are in the gene encoding for the spike protein. By now, this variant is reported in 68 countries. Third, the B.1.1.28.1, also called the P1 variant from Brazil. It was identified on January 6 of 2021. In Japan, 4 travelers came from Brazil and the Amazon region. P1 variant accumulated 17 non-synonymous mutations compared to the reference sequence, 12 in the gene encoding for the spike protein. That is, 70% of mutations are within the spike protein. So far, P1 variant carries the highest number of mutations. In vaccine clinical trials, this variant showed less protection. Other variants are also emerging from different places in the world. Examples include B.1.429 in Southern California, B.1.526 in New York, B.1.617 in India, A.231 in Uganda. Mutations in the spike protein are of great concern to us, as this is the protein used to develop vaccines and therapies based on monoclonal antibodies. The high frequency of mutations within the spike protein in all variants of concern could lead to several outcomes. Tight binding to the ACE2 receptor on human cells, thereby increasing the overall infectivity. Also, to find ACE2 or another receptor within a different host. Host shifting. Potential new host could be household cats or dogs. Although this is unlikely, there is also a possibility of change in the viral receptor within the human host, receptor shifting, from the current ACE2 receptor to another receptor. Alter the efficacy of vaccines, treatments using convalescent plasma derived from patients who survived the natural infection, and monoclonal antibody therapeutics. So far, there are 3 particular mutations with potential biological effects have been identified in variants of concern. D614G, also called DUG mutation, which is associated with increased receptor binding and 10 times more infectivity. N501Y, also called Nelly mutation. This is associated with increased binding to human cells and enhanced transmissibility. E484K, also called EEC mutation, and variants with this mutation shows a certain degree of escape in our immune system by evading binding to specific antibodies generated upon either vaccination or by natural infection. What are double and triple mutants? These are the variants sharing 2 or 3 common mutations observed in other variants of concern. For example, the B1617 variant currently circulating in India is considered a double mutant as it carries L452R mutation found in the Californian variant B1429 and E484K mutation found in both the South African variant and the P1 variant from Brazil. The 2 examples of triple mutants are the P1 variant and the South African B1351 variant, carrying the 3 mutations Nelly, DUG, and EEC that are also found in other variants of concern. Do existing vaccines protect us from these variants? All major vaccines appear to protect us against these variants of concern. However, the degree of protection by a given type of vaccine against a particular variant is still unknown. A limited number of laboratory studies support the notion that existing vaccines could have somewhat reduced protection against variants. Those studies measured the effectiveness of human antibodies generated upon vaccinations with different vaccines to bind particular viral variants. However, the results from already undergoing clinical studies are needed to make conclusive inferences. Though the spike protein is subjected to a significant degree of mutation in all variants, the variants with drastic structural changes in the spike proteins do not survive, as the spike protein must retain the binding capacity to the ACE2 receptor. Both natural infections of the virus as well as the vaccinations against the virus produce many antibodies that bind and thereby block the viral entry. These antibodies are polyclonal. That means they bind to many regions on the spike protein of the virus. It is estimated that there are at least 20 such antibody binding sites on the spike protein. Therefore, it is reasonable to assume that most antibodies generated upon vaccination with existing vaccines are likely to bind spike proteins of the variants at places where the native structure is preserved despite the mutations that alter the structure elsewhere in the spike protein. Interestingly, the inactivated whole virus vaccines like Covaxin produced by Bharat Institute of India and 2 other vaccines made in China, Coronavac and one from Sinopharm, are likely to be quite effective against the variants. These vaccines present the inactivated whole SARS-CoV-2 virus to our immune system, instead of just the spike protein, as in other vaccines developed by Moderna, Pfizer-BioNTech, J&J, and AstraZeneca. Besides the spike protein, many other viral proteins that are not changed significantly in variants exist in the inactivated whole virus to generate antibodies against them, making those vaccines to be more effective against the variants. In addition to antibody-mediated immunity, we also have cellular immunity based on T cells. A recent laboratory study revealed that T cells from patients recovered from COVID-19 infection recognized all 3 dominant variants of concern. Based on limited studies like this one, it is reasonable to assume that T-cell immunity produced by vaccinations with existing vaccines is likely to confer protection against variants. Such T-cell mediated immunity is expected to be more prominent with the inactivated whole cell vaccines. However, additional data from laboratory and clinical studies are needed to fully understand the efficacy of existing vaccines against the variants. Overall, the cross-protection by the existing vaccines against variants will help reduce the severity of the COVID-19 disease. Compared to other viruses like influenza, to our benefit, the SARS-CoV-2 virus mutates slowly. Hence, the cross-protection against the variants by the existing vaccines would still be beneficial until new vaccines against variants come along if needed. Currently, all 3 variants are in circulation in the United States. In spite of that, the number of infections has already come down significantly with the progress in vaccination. This is especially notable when only 40% of the US adult population receive both doses of vaccines. Current spikes of infections are now in the younger generation who have not received the vaccine yet. These observations indicate that the current vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, are effective against the variants. These are the 2 predominantly used vaccines in the United States until J&J vaccine was introduced recently. The existing vaccine platforms that use the spike protein as the vaccine target are highly flexible. They can be quickly adapted in developing new vaccines that are tailor-made to each dominant variant. These new vaccines may be introduced in the future as 3rd or 4th booster shots to control ongoing infections in particular locations with specific variants. However, running clinical trials with these new vaccines and their combinations would be no simple task. Soon, how well the existing vaccines protect us from different variants can be found out from ongoing vaccinations in various countries with particular variant in circulation. Until then, it would be premature to introduce new vaccines geared towards each variant. Can there be breakthrough infections? Yes, no vaccine is foolproof or 100% effective. A breakthrough infection is an infection that occurs after vaccination. Breakthrough infections are in fact very rare. According to a CDC report, only 5,814 documented cases of breakthrough infections were reported in 75 million vaccinated cases. Breakthrough infections are not only rare, even if they occur, they do not usually cause severe COVID-19 disease. However, it would be possible for an emerging variant to increase the number of breakthrough infections, especially a variant carrying EEC mutation with the potential to escape our immune system. Will variants affect current treatments of COVID-19? Therapeutics used to control the immune overdrive or the cytokine storm in COVID-19 patients will not be primarily affected by the disease caused by the variants. However, therapies directed towards blocking the infection by inhibiting the viral entry and keeping the viral load down in patients are likely to be affected. These are monoclonal antibody-based therapies, those developed by Regeneron and Lilly Pharmaceuticals. In 2020, we saw the worst aftermath of infections, especially in Italy, New York, and Brazil. We are currently witnessing the dire situation in India. We have been waiting for vaccines, and when they finally arrive, the world is facing inequality in the global distribution of vaccines. The disparity exists in acquiring vaccines between the handful of high-income countries and the rest of the world. High-income countries represent just a fifth of the global adult population, and they have purchased more than half of all available vaccine doses. A few countries alone can't win this fight against a virus that sees no borders. Those rich countries must bring down the wall of selfishness and unite with the rest of the world to combat this virus. It is also important to make existing vaccines available to the world first, before developing new vaccines against emerging variants. Thank you for listening and sharing.